Welcome everyone. So before we start, I would request all of you to go on mute. And towards the end of the interaction, we have a question and answer slot. There you can ask your questions. So once again, welcome everyone and to this series of interaction on how to keep walking on the sunlit path of progress and joy in these very tough times of boredom, depression, and enormous restrictions on our collective physical life. What is the sunlit path? Well, that is something Shivakumar can answer better. And in this part one of the series, starting today, um, Uncover the Blues, we'll be interacting with Shivakumar, who's the director of AuroYouth, which is the youth wing of Sri Aurobindo Society, Pondicherry. And as Shiv Kumar has already said, me, Palak, and Rishi are the co-moderators. And over to Rishi now, who will be explaining the format of today's session, and he will take it forward from there.
Sure, thanks. Uh, so how it start is that we feel that the best way to discuss or the topic would be through a question answers. These are the questions which all of us face and we constantly think about them. So we'll be starting by them and Shiv Kumar will be answering that. And then later on we'll take some Q&As as Rahul told. So Shiv Kumar, shall we start the questions? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So the first one, Shiv Kumar, is that uh, depression is very mysterious actually. Why do I say that? Is that let's say I get some virus, right? On getting infected from the virus, I get some fever, and that is a clear cut way. Okay, that dude, something is wrong, and a treatment needs to follow there. But that is not the case with the depression, right? Forget symptoms. We don't even know that there is something called a depression, or it is not very well defined. So the first question right up to you is, what is depression like? What happens to us when we are depressed? And I feel that then later on we'll follow with other questions. But first, what is this mystery box? Because it is very confusing to me personally.
Very warm welcome to every one of you. In these times of sagging energies, we need to lift it up. And one thing which seems to be holding us back is a buzzword which is going around called depression. And if Rishi had asked me what is a pizza or what is an ice cream, I could have showed him and then broken it into its components and I could have explained it, because that would have been something very physical. Now, the depression is not having its physical form directly because it is not something physical. For example, if all the people who have depressions, let us say that they will develop a red patch over their forehead. Now, how nice it will be to locate people who are depressed and we can actually start dealing with them appropriately. Because if it were a red patch on the forehead, obviously you can resort to measures on removing the depression from me. I just have to go to a doctor and say that please surgically remove the depression which is sticking onto my forehead, and he would have taken it out and cast it off. But we were not able to do it simply because the first thing we have to understand about depression is it is not a physical thing which has developed physically in the body, which can be removed physically, because depression is psychological in its nature. When it happens, you could develop a lot of physical symptoms, like the curve on your mouth, which is like a smiley. It goes, for a mirror image, it goes like this. And that is an indication that things are not okay. But by making it up, you cannot come out of a depression. When depression, you are sad and you physically turn your smile, your lips to upward state where it smiles. You cannot say that I have gotten rid of depression because smile has appeared on me, because physically you cannot correct it, but it is a symptom. And because it is a symptom, whatever you do in tinkering with the symptom is not going to cure the cause, that which caused it. suppose this is what we usually do, and when we go for therapies and go to doctors, and when we are diagnosed with depression, a lot of pills are given to us. You pop a pill and then we assume that it will take us out of the depression, but it takes us out of certain extreme physical reactions that are happening. And it doesn't take away the cause of depression, because the depression will find another way of expressing itself in our system. But we don't feel depression only in our physical part. It's not like a stomach ache. We can say that, oh, something has gone wrong with the stomach. We go, we get it checked by the doctor. Well, if it is appendicitis, you remove it and you can work on it. You can't show depression in any part. Only you can show the symptom of a depression. Depression has resulted in, for example, because of depression, I started drinking, and the drinking habit has made my liver go for a toss. And well, you can take medicines for making your liver all right, but you cannot take medicines which will cure the depression directly. That is something that we will have to discover, not on the physical body, because that is not where it starts. It starts on another body of us, which is psychological in its nature. And that is why the treatment of the depression is not an exact science, as the exact sciences apply to the physical processes in our system. And this is also one of the reasons. See, if there is a heart disease, well, you can operate, take out the heart, and then perhaps do a lot of experiments and figure out. You can't take out depression, which happens to so many people, and analyze and then understand the nature of depression, because you cannot physically take out depression. Now, this is why the one tool through which we even access this depression before even we can find out a cure is not physical in its nature. It is a psychological. It is a certain awareness which actually makes us even understand that there is something called a depression that is happening to us. Now, that is one of the first thing that we understand. This is also a reason, because it is psychological, there are a lot of techniques which people recommend. I see so many Facebook posts. If you have depression, then tuck, 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 tuck. Try this. Start counting backwards from 100 to 1, or do this. It doesn't work uniformly to everybody, simply because it is not physical in its nature. It's not like, you have a headache. Well, go for a Saridone. I don't know whether Saridone is still available or it is banned. But if it is headache, you prescribe one medicine, irrespective of whoever is the person, because it is physical. Physically, we have similar components. But do we have similar components psychologically, so that for everybody, we can have a same type of depression and same type of treatment and same type of curing? It's not so. And that is why it becomes so difficult to deal with the depression, because we don't understand what is depression and how it happens. The other question is, the first question is it something nice that happens to us? Because if so, then I will receive it with my open arms. And this is something, there are people who love to be depressed. I don't know whether you have seen the depressed. You approach them and you just ask them, how are you? They will say, come, sit with me. And then they will say how bad their situation is, how worst is, and how their depression is so justified. It is as if they are so happy to have this depression, and without depression, there'll be nothing which is valuable and important and significant in their life. As if they want to have it, this is my depression, no, I won't let it go, kind of a thing. And therefore, one of the first thing we have to look into ourselves as part of the process of becoming aware of it. Because as I said earlier, you cannot physically access depression. The one tool with which you access depression is awareness. You just have to become aware of inside of yourself. And when I say inside of yourself, it is not the physical. There are at least two other dimensions to our existence. And without becoming aware of them, we will not be able to even identify and locate where this depression is. So what happens to us when we are depressed? Is it a happy state that one would welcome with open arms? No, the general majority of the people's experience have been otherwise, but there are always exception to rule. There may be a few people who would love to have depression, but by and large, when depression happens, can we identify something which is common occurrence to all of us? Do we feel exuberant and joyous when depression happens? Is it a state of going out and expressing oneself freely and largely, like dancing and then singing and then hugging people? Or is it the opposite movement that when you are depressed, you shrink within yourself? You go to a corner and then you begin to look at yourself almost as if one common statement which occurs at that time is, well, I'm hopeless and my life is a failure. Now, all the other things, what will I do in this state will come rest. But this is a state which makes us shrink so much. It's an extremely uncomfortable position. And when we are forcibly shrunk, something in you just wants to get relieved out of it. And that is when probably we take to extreme measures just to come out of that feeling of suffocation. So what happens to us? We have to be very clear that this is not an atithi, whom we can say atithi devo bhava, but this is an enemy. And this is an enemy who is not physical, but who is psychological in its nature. And therefore, the way of fighting this enemy cannot be only physical way. It has to be psychological as well. So have we answered what is depression and what happens to us when we are depressed? Well, what happens to us when we are depressed is simple. It is when we slip into depression, we are cut off from every positive source of energy. And what are these positive source of energy? Happiness. Even if a happy thing comes, person who has depression says that, no, I am in depression, so don't try to make me happy because I want to feel this depression and then go further down and down. We cut off the source of energy from all possible sources, whether it is an energy from within or above or below or surrounding, from our friends. And even from our friends, we have a tendency to close ourselves. Any friend who can pep us up, who can infuse some energy, we have a tendency to get closed from that person too. And when we are in that state, just remember this one thing, the world is the same. If you divide the moment as before depression and after depression, the world before depression and after depression is the same. Because before depression, the world appeared beautiful. The food was good. Whatever you have ordered through Zomato or this one appeared so tasty. But the moment something shifts inside, we slip into depression, the same world, the same food doesn't taste the same way anymore. Why? Because we are cutting ourselves off from any source that can nourish us, that can make us happy. And that is one of the occurrences that happens when we have depression. And it is not a state of strength. It is not a state of happiness. It is a state. What will happen to us when we cut off all the sources of energy? Simple. We become weak. And depression is a state of weakness. It is not a state of strength. It is not a state of happiness. Therefore, should we want to have depression? Well, I'm not the one to say. I leave the decision to you. And this is what is depression. It's a cutting off of energy, and it is psychological in its nature.
Sure. So next, so I think I got the clarity that what is depression and how do you really feel when you are depressed. But next comes that what causes, right? What causes depression? Like does it lightning that strikes me, or like what does happen exactly there?
Well, it is more like a flood situation that seems to be happening nowadays. Lightning strikes only a few people. There seems to be a massive flood which is sweeping people off. Now, if you really want to look into the causes of depression, the tool that we have is a tool of awareness. And this awareness of what? Now, can we, with this tool of awareness, scan inside of our body and try to locate the depression? Now, this is where we have to understand what we are made up of. Because if we are simply physical entities, then depression is a physical occurrence, pop up a physical pill, and then it removes probably something, and then the depression goes away. The very fact that I have said it is psychological will ask us, are we only the physical entity, or do we have other dimensions of existence which we are not really conscious of? And maybe depression is an unwanted guest. I've almost called it as our enemy. So the enemy usually comes through the back door, and it is entering through one of the doors of a room in me, within me, a part of me, which I am not conscious of, which I am not very well aware of. And if so, without figuring out who we are, what we are made up of, it is impossible to see who comes into it and who goes out from it. And here we have a tradition of at least more than 10,000 years of a branch of science which has done this exploration of what we are made up of. When we look at ourselves, it's not only the body that we see and feel. There are at least two more dimensions which is very easy for us to locate and then feel, and we need to dive into it before we can figure out and how the depression comes because of what. So when we look at ourselves, it's not only the physical things that we feel, we are also people of emotions. Who here can say that, no, I don't have any emotions. All that I feel is my body and things that are secreted from my body. Well, if we look at, there are two ways of looking at the emotions. The modern way is look at emotions as a reaction triggered by something secreting within the body. They say there is even something which when it secretes, we feel happy, and it is what we interpret as happiness. It is putting the cart before the heart. It is almost saying that if you make your mouth into a position which curves upward, then what you feel is called happiness. Is it not putting the cart before the heart? Is it not because we are happy that the curve happens, or because you make a curve, you feel happiness? Now, this is something that we have to go into. It is not because something secretes in our body. When something secretes in the body, we might feel a pleasant sensation in the body. But in order to feel the happiness in the emotion, it is in a dimension where we have a body which is made up of emotions. It is in that body that we feel all the emotions, happiness or sadness, and one of the emotions, depression too, is felt in that body primarily. Well, where do we primarily feel the emotions? And it's not obviously, of course, in our legs or in our hands that I carry all the emotions so that I can start feeling. It is primarily in the region of the heart. It's this area is where primarily we feel emotions. Sensations of the body is felt all over, but happiness, sadness, sukha and dukkha, and also jealousy. We don't say that I feel extremely jealous of you and I feel it all over my fingers and my fingers are filled with, no, it's not going to happen. The way we feel the emotions is primarily in around our heart. And why do we feel it? All that we can say is that emotional dimension is connected to us through this region, but it is not physical. And do we have only these two dimensions? We have a physical body, and then we have lots and lots of emotions, at least 100 or 200 emotions all flying around. And of course, obviously, we hardly have any clue which emotion is playing, which emotion is jumping around when. But at least when it jumps around, when it jumps around a little too much, we suddenly become aware of it in our heart. Well, a third dimension is the dimension of thought. And again, thought is not physical because you cannot pick out one neuron and say that this is the thought that I had yesterday, but the neural activity is a result triggered by the thought. I mean, there have been people who, even when their brain is dead, They have experiences. They are called very well documented cases of out of body experience where the thinking still happened. Only the brain was not responding. The neural network was not firing. And yet the thinking was happening in the thought body. Now, this gives us a clue to what we are made up of. We have a physical body, but we also have an emotional body where hundreds of emotions are felt. And only thing, we do not get to decide what emotion we feel, unfortunately, right as of now. In the same way, we have a third dimension, a third body, which is made up of our mind, our thoughts. And there too, if you have to ask me, can we think only what we want to think? Well, I challenge you to try to think only what you want to think. Just imagine if you have had a fight with your girlfriend, and then when you hit the bed at night, and then already you have been thinking, and then you've been feeling bad about it, and you don't know what to do. And then at night when you hit the bed, you really want to go to sleep so that tomorrow you have somehow make it up with her. But when you hit the bed, and when you want to switch off, when you don't want to think, does the mind listen to you? Hardly. That is the time it comes back again and again. Oh, how can she say that to me? How can she do this to me? I have given her everything, my time. I have been after her for half of my life. I have done her this. Yet how can she be angry with me? And then this is, it is as if we don't have full control of what thoughts come into our mental body. And also we don't have the control on sending these thoughts out, telling that I don't want this thought, I want only particular thoughts. So we don't have the control to choose what we like to keep. We don't have the control to kick out what we don't want. Now, this is who we are. At least this is who we are conscious of. Now, if this is so, what happens? Let's go a little deeper into what happens and when a depression, or what causes a depression. When we look into any of this is what we are. Let us say we encounter a situation, and we are living in these three parts. Just imagine, I hope you are not living in any other dimension than these three, because one, I'm very sure I'm living in the physical dimension, and the proof is any food that I eat, I feel so good about it, so much conscious of it. I also feel conscious of my emotions. I'm also conscious of my thoughts. And these are my. When I am in that state, there is a clear identification that this is who I am. And if this is who I am, and this is what lives in the world and encounters situation, suppose a pleasant thing happens. For example, somebody comes when we are really hungry with a pizza ordered from, I don't know, the Pizza Hut, nice, yummy, with lots of, what do you call that? Toppings and other things. And the moment you see it, it gives such a pleasant sensation. And the moment you are about to have it, suddenly the friend says, oh my God, I did not think that I have invited two of my friends who are actually my bosses, and they are just about to come. We have to offer them something, and I only have this pizza. So as you are about to enjoy the pizza, suddenly it is taken away. And what happens? Because something in us is already, of course, in the mouth, it's already dripping, but in our emotional body, there is always a pleasant sense of expectation. Oh my God, after a long time, I'm going to eat pizza. And mentally, we say, this is the best way to spend time with my friend. And this is a kind of an ideal friend. My friend gets pizza, I sit, we eat. Already the thoughts are also formed. Suddenly, when it's completion, when its fulfillment is denied. Now, this is what happens. It's an extremely interesting thing. So it is an unpleasant thing. We were about to be happy, that happiness is taken away, and an unpleasant thing happens. What happens when this unpleasant thing happens? First thing immediately is there is a sense of disappointment. Oh my God. And it's almost as if the happiness which is about to be experienced has been taken away, snatched from us. And immediately the mind begins to think, what are the things that we can do? Can you not tell your friends not to come? Tell them that you have an emergency, or should we disappear? All the things are happening simply because an unpleasant situation has occurred. Now, when the unpleasant situation occurs, when something is denied to us, a satisfaction is denied to us, we usually enter into two states. If we are strong, we enter into a state of revolt. Tell your bosses not to come. You tell it to his face that no, this is not the time. I'm spending time with my friend. And a job and other things, no, it's nothing. They can't do anything to me. When you are in a position, you can say, well, I know all the big bosses. This boss can do nothing to me. When you are in a position of strength, when you are strong, well, you revolt. But when we are weak, then what happens is immediately that part, which we call as the emotional part, kind of a negative impulse gets in, a kind of a dissatisfaction sets in, which opens a kind of a door to negative energies. Now listen to me carefully. We were about to open ourselves to positive energies because we were with our friend, and the moment that is denied, and because it is denied, there is a sensation within us which sinks, and the moment it sinks, it closes its door to anything that gives us positive energy. And in that state of sinking, what can enter into us are the negative energies in the form of negative emotions and negative thought. Now, we will become aware of it only when we are conscious of all the parts of our body. It's interesting. We can actually concretely feel when we practice with that tool called awareness, what happens where. Now, it's interesting that I remember a funny incident of what happens in our body, because when we really, really want something, and then what happens to our part. So there was a time when the mother was sitting in a place and she was receiving a lot of disciples. They come, they do pranam, and then they go away. So she was allowing, and when one particular disciple come, suddenly her face became very quizzical, almost, what is happening? And then she blessed him, and the person went away. And then mother quietly called another person, and who happened to be a Tamil person. So the person who came was a Tamil disciple. So she called a Tamil person and said, can you please tell me what is this dosa? Is it something bad that is happening? So the person said, no, mother, this is a South Indian dish and we eat it almost every day. It's part and parcel of the event. We don't have it in the ashram because in the ashram, well, if you don't know, dosas are not served in the ashram dining room, and even idli once in a while. So any South Indian who comes to the ashram will have to let go of the dosa eating habit. So when the mother heard this, they said, that is why. So the disciple said, why, mother, what happened? Well, when that disciple came and he did pranam, his vital, the emotional part was shouting, dosa, 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 dosa. And I was wondering, what is this dosa? It must be something he forgot. He has forgotten it is home or what? Now I understand. Now this is what is happening. Now mother could feel it happening in other people too. And can we not feel it within ourselves if we are aware of it? When something we desire, very beautiful, satisfying occurrence, and when that is denied to us, there is something in within that revolts, and that happens primarily in our emotions. And once this happens, well, all the other thing, the insistence of this part, well, this part we have to understand its nature, because this is a part where usually all the impulses of desire and anger and depression and all the emotional energies are like in a turmoil, like how tsunami waves come. So the waves are happening all the time. And if we are conscious of it, then we can feel that when a pleasant occurrence is denied to us, that is what puts us in a state of depression, which means a kind of a shrinking if we are weak, and a kind of revolt, almost destructive in its nature, when we are strong. So, and also another thing, when we are so much focused on my happiness being denied or my hope, dreams, and aspiration denied, it could be any of these things. When these happen, then there is a kind of a closing of this part within us. It stops receiving positive energies, it sinks down. When it sinks down, now this is an important, a kind of a different door opens on the outside. What is this door on the outside? Well, just imagine that you have a house right in the middle of a marketplace and you have a very strong house. You can allow only the people whom you want to enter into that house. And just imagine that suddenly this door gets opened. Now, who are the people who are likely to come? Only the people with good intention and well behaved people are going to come? No, anybody can rush in. And this is what happens when in that state of depression, when we become somebody who is weak. First thing, it puts us into a state of weakness. In that weakness, we lose control of the door, which keeps away all the people, all the emotions and thoughts which have ill intention. But the moment we are caught with that depression, when satisfaction is denied to us, we lose control over this door, we open it, and anything can enter into us. A thought which is extremely self-destructive, an emotion which makes us shrink further and further, making our energies get depleted. And this is what happens. So what causes depression is actually our expectation and our insistence on them getting satisfied puts us into, when it is denied, puts us into a state of depression. So this is an important thing that we have to keep in mind. And therefore, when we have expectation, when we are about to enter into a state of happiness, let us be very, very careful, because one, if it is a happiness that is going to be given by somebody from outside in the form of a pizza or in the form of a friend, we have to understand that they can also be taken away anytime, because the whole world outside is not in our hands. So when that expectation is denied, then what results in is a very unsatisfied situation. And this is what, the moment it happens, the emotional part gets vexed. And that vexation puts us in a state of negativity, which opens the door, and in comes a destructive thought, in comes even anger, which you want to show with your friend. And you are going to be shouting at him very soon, if not. And it is going to put you generally in the worst possible mood. And when this happens, what comes out of us also will be a worst possible scenario. And most of the time, important to notice, when people are in this state, they might refuse to receive the help from outside too. Why? Because they are not able to sense anything positive, but all they are filled with is a sensation of negativity. And negativity goes well, and negativity welcomes other negativities to come. It loses the capacity, and therefore at times we might refuse the help also. It's a kind of an ill will. Even somebody who wants to help us in this time, there's a kind of an ill will, no, and we might push it away. And for this, if this is not to happen, well, later we will see how not to happen. It's a sense of a kind of a self-centeredness. I would even call it as a kind of an egoism, which insists on my desires, my expectations being satisfied. I want to make one difference between this desire and satisfaction to another wanting. This is not the same as a wanting which is called, let us say, I want to be the best I can be. I want to become somebody through whom a lot of good will be done. I want to be somebody who brings out the best of music in me, the best of art in me. These do not seem to be labeled as desire, because their quality is so very different. And these, I would like to call it as aspiration. Now we need to differentiate. And how do we differentiate? Simple. One simple rule is, anything, a wanting that comes from deep within ourselves, we call it as an aspiration, because it comes from the depth. And the things that come from outside are in the form of desire.
Sure. So
So
Shraddha,
this
I
is
think,
what,
yeah, I think we are a little short, but two very important questions. So the first
yes.
one goes by, let's say that, okay, I think now we have understood what is depression and how do we feel when we are really depressed. So the next is, how do we come out of depression? And second is that, is there even way that I even can prevent it? Like,
Yes.
avoided from that. Like, yes.
Well,
Quickly,
preventing
next.
it needs a lot of preparation by us before we enter into it. So now I'm not
Yeah.
in a good state. I
Hmm.
can be in a state which could be identified as a state of depression. The
Hmm.
first thing is I want to get out of it. So one of the things is if we look into the three parts of us, if we can detect whether a depression has entered through the door of our physical part, because one of the causes of the depression is when our body is in a really fatigued state, when it is tired. It could be because for the last few days I have not slept properly, I have not eaten properly, I have overexerted myself. If that is so, my body
Hmm.
enters into a condition of fatigueness. Fatigueness means we lose control over
Hmm.
the body, over its energies. When it happens,
Hmm.
the door outside, which I have said, opens and all the negative energies come into, and then we tend to shrink. If this is what we could detect at
Hmm.
the physical level, it's a simple thing to do is go to your room and then just jump onto your bed, rest, relax, dream nice dreams, lie down, eat good food, do a good workout. And this
Hmm.
is the simple thing which will bring in so much physical energy into your physical part that you won't, the depression will
Sure.
just like that disappear. But
Hmm.
if we detect that the depression is more than that,
Hmm.
one straight away, one rule that I can recommend is when you are under depression, just refuse to act but try to remain as quiet as possible, simply because when we are in depression we end up doing stupid things. We can destroy what took us years to build up. It could be a relationship, it could be something else, your career. You in a depressed state, you encounter your boss and you end up saying something stupid, then you lose your career. Or in your relationship, when you are depressed of the opinion that I have done so much, so many years I have followed you and then spent so much money on you, time on you, effort on you, and then why are you turning your face away from me? I'm depressed. And if you act in that state, then you are going to regret later. And therefore, one thing is, let us let us not shrink and go to a corner. Even if we are in the middle of the room, let us refuse to act and become quiet. In that
Sure.
quietness, what happens, one thing is, I told you we have a tool called awareness through which we can detect and sense. It's almost like the stethoscope of a doctor through which you can
Hmm.
feel the pulse. Like that,
Hmm.
awareness is a tool. We can see what happens where. In that
Hmm.
quietude, we can find where the problem is. The second thing which we can do at the heart level
Hmm.
is, I told you about the aspiration. All of us have aspiration. I want to be the best I can be. Just one thing we will have to see, what happens to me, is it got anything to do with my aspiration? Is it going to help me in realizing my aspiration, or it is going to act against this aspiration? Because
Hmm.
what is my aspiration? I want to be the best I can be, the best musician, best lover, best, whoever it is there. Is it going against it? That is one thing. If it is
Hmm.
not, well, refusing to act in depression. Second thing, learning to ignore the depression, because here is an unwanted guest, an enemy which has come into my house and I'm going to completely ignore. How long will a guest can stay in your house when you completely ignore that person? And therefore immediately within no time the depression leaves. A
Sure.
third one, an important one, I think we will take 5 minutes to dwell on it, because it is one thing which also answer your next question. How do we
Hmm.
even prevent this happening? It is,
Hmm.
I told you all this happens either in our physical part, in our emotion, or in our mind. These are the three. But these three do not by themselves constitute us. They constitute only a surface part of us. Now, Are we aware of anything other than this? No. Why? Because behind this surface part, there is a door which prevents us from seeing what is deep within. Now,
Mm.
I would want to share one quotation from Sri Aurobindo, which is
Mm.
such a beautiful expression of us. So I'm going to share my screen with everybody. And Rishi, could you tell me whether you can see?
Yes, I can see that. I can see that.
Yes. Now,
Mm.
this is an important thing when we make use of the tool of awareness, and if we get into a practice of using the tool every day. For example, I get up in the morning, I use the tool of awareness just to become aware of, am I only this confusing thoughts of which I have no control? Am I just a bundle of 100 150 emotions? They come and go whenever they want, and within the body I have no clue what happens in the body. Sometimes it behaves properly. Am I only this, or am I much more? So when we sit everyday morning with the tool of awareness, it's like a torchlight. What we discover is what Sri Aurobindo says here. There are, we might say, two beings in us. One is myself, Shivakumar. I know because I've been knowing myself for the last 20, 30, 40 years. So I know this is me. But what Sri Aurobindo says is there are two beings in us, one on the surface, our ordinary exterior mind, life, and body consciousness. This is the result of how I grew. The people, my surroundings, my education, everything outside that has happened to me is going to determine. But now, another beautiful thing, another behind the veil, there is another door, another wall, I would say. Behind that wall, there is another mind, another life energy, another physical part of me constituting an inner Shivakumar. Now, when for the first time when I saw this, I was awestruck because I thought this is me. And whatever it happens in me, I have to live with this. But for the first time, somebody came and told me that no, there is another mind, another emotional part, another physical part. And this was a wow factor. My first straightaway question is, what can I do? Because I feel so many problems in my outer personality. And if I have another personality, does it mean that I'm doubling my problems? And that is where Sri Aurobindo said, first thing, we are not spontaneously able to feel it because it's a very thick wall. But through the tool of awareness, and if we sit regularly with it, suddenly one day we can break that wall. And what happens? This is what Sri Aurobindo says. First, a movement inward by which instead of living on the surface mind, we break the wall between our external and now deeper subliminal self. And he says, this can be brought about by gradual effort and discipline. And that discipline, we give it the name yoga, or here, integral yoga. Yoga is that discipline through which we put us in touch with our deeper Shivakumar. For me or for you, there is another Rishi who is there very much with his own mind, his own emotions, and his own physical energies. Only thing we need to figure out is that Rishi a greater problem than the Rishi we are seeing? Now, this is the most beautiful and extraordinary discovery. And this discovery is what I'm sharing with you. When we break that wall through that intense focus and concentration using the tool of awareness, call it meditation, call it concentration, whatever you call it, when we break down that wall, what we discover within, I'm reading the quote, what we discover within the secret part of ourselves is an inner being. And at its center, there is something which is a shining light, which nothing can actually hide when we get in touch with it, a soul. And then an inner mind, an inner life, an inner subtle physical entity. Now the question comes, are they more problem givers? No. This is what Sri Aurobindo says beautifully, which is much larger in its potentialities. Now, remember when we say we have a lot of potential, when we say to somebody that he has got a lot of potential to be somebody great, what are we saying? Right now, well, he is somebody who is a little problematic, but behind the wall, within him, there is great potential. Corporate world, we call it as inner potential. Spiritual world, we call it with inner being, inner self. And what is it? What is its characteristic? Because we have to know whether this can help us in times of depression, and that is why we are going deep into it. And this inner self is more plastic. There is no rigidity. There is such a capacity to adapt to any situation. Are you making my life difficult? Where give me one day and I'm going to enjoy the challenges which is thrown at me. Are you making it too easy? Well, I'm going to find ways and means of making it more complex, more beautiful, and all the more enjoyable. Making it more challenging, I can do it. Now, when I get in touch with it, do I feel that people are intimidating me more? How will be my attitude towards my boss? Well, my outer boss is going to be only boss in his name, but he will know that I am the real boss because I will become so much more powerful. In what? Because this mind is powerful in its thought. It's too good with its clarity, and when it articulates thing, you find it very difficult to say no or refuse it because it comes with such superb power of clarity and coherence. You will not find it easy to refuse it, and more capable of a manifold knowledge and dynamism than the outer surface mind, life, or body. Because our outer mind and life and body has got a door which is not our control. Anytime it opens, remember, our outer person is like a house right in the middle of a heavily congested marketplace. And remember, we have no control over its doors. But here on the inner person, we are solid because nobody else can easily walk into that part and upset it. And what about its characteristics? Tremendous amount of potentiality, infinite potentiality is lying there, and unlimited amount of happiness is waiting for us to discover, an unlimited amount of wisdom is waiting to discover, an unlimited amount of power and energy is again waiting there, and also an unlimited amount of physical energy, so much so that, well, after working 2 months on a project work, you are not going to get burnt out on the third month and say that, boss, I want 1 month's salary on with leave, because you will find that give me more work, more energy, because I can do more. That is the amount of energy that gets unleashed when you get in touch with this inner part. The best way is to get out of living on the surface and get into that inner part and start living from inside out. And when that happens, what happens is a beautiful thing, because this inner person, what we call as the true Rishi Sharma, the true Shivakumar, the true Rahul, what does it do? Our inner personality, is capable of a direct communication with the universal forces. You're not limited to yourself. See, my mind over the last 25 years of education can only think this much. Don't worry. All the thoughts which are there in the entire universe are available at your disposal. You can select the best thought. A problem comes, the first thought comes as a solution. You don't have to accept. You can choose the best from other thoughts, and you will have the capacity because you are in touch with that. The universal forces, movements, objects of a cosmos, a direct feeling and opening to them. Well, you are in a position, let us say you are a team leader, you have a team of 10, 15 people. Can you have that emotional rapport with them? Because you try that and you will know, you will feel exhausted by the end of the day in trying to keep that energies up. But do it from the inner person. What about not just 10 people, but even 100 people? You will be able to open up your feelings, and unlimited love and understanding, love and wisdom is going to pour out of it, and a direct action on them, even a widening of itself beyond the limits of the personal self. I'm going to close this because I just wanted to share that this, when we are in depression, when we first thing refuse to act, get into a little quiet, connect ourselves with our deepest aspiration, and through that knock at the inner door. And if it opens, when we get into our inner personality, from there, once we get there, we can not only ignore the depression, but we can be in the zone. Remember, this is something beautiful which you might have heard. When people are at their best, we say they are in the zone. When depression comes, get into this inner zone. So this
Sure.
is, we have just looked at a couple of things, but this,
Mm,
if we can make it into our everyday part of exercise using the
mm,
tool of awareness, concentration, or meditation, if we
sure.
open the inner door and if we get in touch with the real Shivakumar, the real Rahul, or real Rishi, when that person is active, if somebody says depression, you will say, what is depression? I have never heard of it, or at least I have not felt it for the last several months because I have been in touch with it. The true solution for,
Hmm,
because any outside remedy is not a true remedy if it is of physical in nature.
hmm.
So I've taken up a little extra time, but it's
Yeah,
important
that's
to
okay.
know the possibility in us, and we need to tell it to every youth in India that there is an infinite potential sitting right in front, inside you. Only thing, there is a wall, there is a door, it is there, and come up with an activity through
Hmm,
which you weaken that door so that gradually it disappears, or with one mighty sweep, break it open so that you get aware of this inner being, the inner
sure.
person, the real person. Over to you, Rishi.
Sure. I think before we jump into the Q&A session, right, I think just one thing which I feel
Yes.
is very important is there are two things. One is depression, and another one is feeling low on energy. The
Yes.
former one is definitely a serious issue which needs cure, but feeling low on energy can be a temporary phase, and we should not confuse them because then
Yes.
we dilute the thing of depression. So maybe if
Yes.
you can just on 2 minutes, 2 3 minutes, maybe you can just
Yes.
have a quick thing
Now,
on
I told you about us being a house in the marketplace.
it. Hmm.
So, inside the house, let us say the power energy is cut off. So, we are able to do only very few limited activities because our
Correct.
internet is not working, our mobile phone is not working. So, all the power is kind of switched off because
Hmm.
of certain things. Now, it is normal for us to feel a little low energy if we have spent too much, if we don't know how to replenish it. Usually this happens when we have not opened the inner doors. We have limited energy in our mind, in our emotions, and in our body. If we don't enter into a regular replenishing process, we do feel a little bit low. But
Sure.
because it feels a little low, you open your outer door when you are in the marketplace. What comes in is something which will sweep you off your feet, and that is the unwanted enemies. It's a door that opens outside, it's a door through which the enemy enter. And what happens in depression is this cutting off. Even if we are open to the inner door, closing the inner door and opening the outer door is actually what we call as depression, because anything can come in and overpower us, because in our house the normal energy is cut off. And it is okay when we are a little low in energy, that is a time when we have to replenish it by opening the inner door and or through normal methods. We feel a little low in energy physically, eat good food, exercise, it returns. Emotionally, you are a little drained, go take a little bit of rest, watch some happy movies, happy something, and then get back. Mentally, you are very drained, go to sleep. Usually going to sleep replenishes the energy, good food, exercise. But if we choose to take it to the next level of how can it happen to me, why can it happen to me, and with an insistent, when that part begins to open the outside door, anything can enter. And then we begin to sink, because the enemy, first thing it sinks, makes us sink. And in that state of sinking, destructive thoughts and destructive emotions come and overpower us. And this we have to understand. So the moment depression happens, close the outside door, take a little
Sure.
back, remain quiet, focus,
Hmm.
replenish,
Hmm.
and then come back. The
Sure.
low energy could lead to depression.
Hmm.
Depression is like opening the house door in a marketplace where
Hmm.
you are surrounded with enemies.
Sure, sure, sure. I think that is a great question answers. Next, I think that we can take up the questions from the audience, and we have been collecting them since chat. So I
All
think the
right.
first is from Ravi Gupta ji,
Yes.
and that is that actually I wanted to ask that,
Okay.
but yeah. So as he says that I like the idea of treating depression as an unwanted guest and ignoring it. But how should you ignore it when it is all you feel? Like how is the ignorance different than the denial of existence of the depression? So that is something that we wanted to discuss, Shabda. Maybe I'll
Sorry,
chat.
your voice just froze
Okay,
for a couple of seconds. So if you could repeat
sure.
it.
Maybe I'll repeat. Sure.
Hmm.
So he says that I like the idea of treating depression as an unwanted guest and ignore it.
Yes.
But how should you ignore it when it is all you feel? And
Ha.
how is ignorance different than
Ex-
the denial of existence?
Excellent question. So in your house,
Huh,
you have a drawing room,
huh,
and that is where the guests come.
hmm,
Now, when you
yes,
are in the drawing room, when your awareness is only of the drawing room, obviously, when the enemy walks in, you are going to feel as if this is all that I'm going to have. And this is the question that when that um, that depression is all that I feel, which
hmm,
means that you are there in that one room and then thinking that you all the other rooms in the house are not accessible to you. It is as
hmm,
simple as that. How can
hmm,
we have only depression? It is true that when depression overpowers it, we
hmm,
tend to focus exclusively on it, and that exclusive focus makes us feel that this is all that I have. It is as if that Atiti, unwanted Atiti comes, and you want to focus all your attention and then give him your time and effort to
hmm,
treat this unwanted Atiti. No, we can very well ignore that Atiti and turn
hmm,
our attention to there is a kitchen in our house, there is a drawing room, there is a gym room, there is a TV room, there are other rooms, and that we will be able to do it only when we learn to ignore. And that's why it is so important not to be under the grasp of depression when it comes. And
hmm,
can we ignore depression? Very much. How? By focusing our attention on something which is pleasant, beautiful. Just take up a book which you love more, or watch a movie which inspires you. There are so many things because of which you can turn your attention. The moment you turn your attention, suddenly what you thought as the only thing which you are living with, suddenly you become aware of 100 other things.
hmm.
And this is important, to turn our attention away and then pick up anything. And then we dwell on it. Or if we can, well, we always have an inner door which is still there, half open. But let's enter into it. And then from there, come out all, with our guard and everything. And then we will drive away this enemy. Because on the inside door, there is an armory also, where a talwar and the defensive armor and everything is available, probably including a gun. Don't know what else is there. Then we
Hmm.
step out and we can. It's not true to say that when we feel the depression, that's all that
Hmm.
we feel. That's all that we feel because our focus, our entire focus is only on that. Turn away the focus on something which is pleasant, and then you will be able to come out of it.
Got it. Got it. I think the next question is from Pooja, and she
Yes.
asked, "Depression hits differently to different people. For ones
Yes.
whose life with the constant need to exercise control over their external as well as internal world through
Hmm.
their powerful mental, how to create an opening for the will to generate a will to accept and liver down the need to control everything, because it is in this sense of control that which manifests as the expectation loop, which makes depression a recurring phenomena."
My God, I think half of the question went
Yes.
above my head. But I can understand. Depression hits
Okay.
differently to different people, where depression is depression, and people respond to it very differently, because there are
Correct.
some common enemies which enter into very identifiable enemies, and
Hmm.
we are not equipped to deal with it in a same way, and therefore we respond to it differently. Now,
Correct.
for one who lives with a constant need to exercise control over their
Hmm.
external as well as internal world. Now, I'm going to flip this order. because somebody who would like to exercise control over the internal will understand that as far as the outside world is concerned, not everything is under your control, because we are talking about how many billions of people in this world? Well, that much. And it is an impossibility to control everything around, but what can be controlled absolutely is the inner world. And once we do that, then we get a capacity to influence and change even a small limited number of circle. You have a team with you, you have a family, you have a group of friends. Well, when you start living inside out, you will gain control over the dynamics of expressing yourself. Always positivity in your thoughts, positivity in your emotions, and even in your action. It is so inclusive, so liberal, so unlimited, so unconditional, that immediately you can begin to influence your friends circle through this. Because one important thing, what happens in our thoughts and our emotions are actually very, very contagious, and they have the capacity to influence, just as anything gloomy that is happening can influence us. For example, suppose we are in a good mood, suddenly you are in a room, suddenly your friend comes in who is in utter depression. I tell you, in 10 minutes of time spending with him, you'll find that already your energies are sagging, and there is a certain unhappiness, and you wouldn't know even the cause of it. And this is important because we are not aware of the energies flowing in and flowing out. Because I told you, we are a house with windows and doors and even the roof open, and therefore things come in and things go without us being aware of it, because we have not really people with defined boundaries. Now, when we do that, when somebody comes in, we can actually first, by remaining within, be not influenced by that person's state. If he's depressed or sad, doesn't affect us. Second one, once I live within, I can open the doors, outer door now from inside. What happens? All the things from within me, a kind of an unlimited exuberance of happiness and creativity, and lot of positive things is going to come out. And that is going to enter into that person and change that person too. So this is how we operate when we get in touch with that internal world. And to the extent that we are well rooted and we train our outer personality to express what is inside without anything narrowing it down, without anything limiting, to that extent we can control the outside world. So when you say the control over the outside world, you can control the outside world only to the extent that you have mastered yourself. Now, it's not having people in high places and being the favorite of the boss, which is going to give you control over your circumstances in your office or anything else. They are all very flimsy, because any moment, if the boss changes, well, your control will go away. The true control of the outside world, the key to it lies in you being master of yourself, and that through that you can exercise and influence the external world.
Sure. I think now we have a question from Pragya.
All right. So one simple thing, if anybody who has given up your nice Sunday dinner and then probably getting calls, feel free to quietly slip out, because the topic of depression is so nice, so vast, so current a topic, that it's only natural that we can go into, and I would love to answer more questions. So from now to everybody, it is optional. If you have other engagement, just quietly slip out. But take this one takeaway from this interaction so far, that what we call as ourselves is very, very limited. But there is a wall behind which is hiding us from the real me. The real mind of Shivakumar is not accessible now, nor emotions, nor the physical energies. I must enter into everyday process using the tool of awareness, call it yoga. There are different techniques are available through which I will have to make this wall transparent and finally break it down, so that certain energies from within, which is in touch with the universal nature, begins to come out. Then it is only a question of training my outer personality to express. Now, this is what we call in India the yoga, uniting ourselves with that source of wisdom and power and energy and beauty on the inside, and learning and training ourselves to express it. This is what we call as yoga. So have
Sure.
this as the one universal remedy for it, and we will enter into other questions too. So the people
Sure.
who have asked the questions who really want to have a further interaction, please stay tuned. We will have
Sure.
take out a little more time. Go ahead,
Sure.
Rishi.
I think we'll take maybe 5-10 minutes. So we'll start from high priority questions.
All right.
And one of them is so what if someone's so this question by Pragya. What if someone's dissatisfaction is due to not being able to have a long lasting connection with a subliminal
Yes.
sense? Dissatisfaction due to blockage in the process of aspiration rather than any unfulfilled desire.
Ha. Now, this is such a beautiful question, because this is a
Uh,
question which anybody with an aspiration would have encountered. We call them as sadhaks, aspirants, because we want to be connected with what is inside. And initially it seems to happen. After that, it doesn't seem to happen whenever we want to. And what about in such cases? Now, this is the beauty of this process. Um, what we call as the inner, she has even given the correct name for it, the subliminal self, the real me. Now, the real me, it is the nature of the real me to be wanting to come out and by our side, and the real me lives for the sake of being of use to me. And that is its nature, and that is why we want it. And therefore it is already taking several steps towards and coming. In fact, I told you about a wall which we have to break down. I tell you that is not the full truth, because if the wall is of 10-inch thickness, from the other side my inner self has already corroded 9 inches of it. It is just waiting for that 1 inch to be broken by me from the other side. The beautiful story, which is an illustration, is what is within us takes 9 steps towards us by the time we consciously take 1 step towards it. Now, Sri Aurobindo even flips it so much so that, in fact, the very fact that we want to be connected with our inner self is because the inner self, even through that wall, has reached out to us, and already with a magnet-like pull, all our externalized gaze is turned inwards, and we just get one thought: I want to be get connected with my inner self. We get one emotion: I want to feel what that unlimited happiness is. Even that thought and that emotion is a result of what is inside, already influencing us. And therefore we willfully turn our gaze away from it. That is the only way in which a long meeting is not going to happen for a long time. There is no other way that if we turn inward in with an aspiration to get connected, that itself is a result of the magnet which is sitting inside, and then it happens in a rapid fashion. But what about we turn it for 5 minutes, and then the remaining 23 hours and 55 minutes we are turning all the time outward? What is he doing? What is he doing? And then how much increment the other person is doing, and then what is happening with the suicide, which is becoming a popular word. And we are looking for bits and pieces, things to engage us from outside. So the only way the long disconnect can happen is when we consciously turn outwards. Because even this is one, the Gita says it very beautifully, that swalpamapyasya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. So out of so much of your activities, even if you do a little act that is sufficient, it will bring you 100-fold result. And that is the nature of what is inside. So there is only one simple thing, that we are not paying enough attention. That's it. It's nothing to do. It's not that the inner fellow, the real fellow Shivakumar, is trying to say that, no, I don't want to come out. I want to be in that cozy thing. No, he wants to come out because the nature of that inner Shivakumar is an exuberance which wants to come out and exuberantly express. The only way it is not going to happen is if I turn my focus away, because there are so many things which pulls me and pushes me. Now,
Hmm.
it is not to say that, well, we will have to go inside a room and shut ourselves so that, oh, I'm not making myself available to the outside world. Because physically, if you isolate, that's not a true isolation. Your desires and emotions will still reach out to the people you are in relationship, this and that. Mentally, it's in touch with the entire universe because it's constantly running around. So what I mean is not to isolate oneself, but even when one is engaged in everyday activities, the aspiration can be turned inward. When I brush my teeth, I can say I brush my teeth so that I do it with this attitude that may I get connected with my inner self. When I eat, may this food be an offering to that inner self. When I speak, may my thoughts be an expression of this inner self. When I express my emotions, when I fall in love or show love to other person, I do it with this attitude that may this be an expression coming out of, may every act, every thought, every feeling, every emotion, and every second of my life, may it be an aspiration for this to come out. And the moment we reach it, I tell you, what is inside cannot hold it back. Everybody who have experienced it has assured it, because this is
Sure.
not something which is about to hold us. But if we turn ourselves away completely, that is the only way we can say that I'm not able to be in touch with it.
Sure.
So I hope,
Yes.
Pragya, it's not a
Hmm.
blockage which is already existing. It is only our turning our attention away. We just for 5 minutes, for 10 minutes, we wish that, oh, how nice it will be if I get in touch with the real Shivakumar. And then suddenly I look at 9 o'clock. Oh my God, now this is time for Game of Thrones episode, next episode, final serial. And then immediately we are out. Or we think about tomorrow, or we regret the past, or so many things
Hmm.
draw us out. That is the only thing. So we will have to learn not to say that we have to isolate, but we have to be completely involved in everyday activities with that one aspiration that may I, all these things I do, may this be an expression of what is
Sure.
inside me.
Hmm.
That one, well, no blockage is
Sure.
going to hold you back, Pragya.
Shivda, I would like to just, add one more thing to this thing. I
Yes.
totally understand what you said, and I totally believe in that. This question came, also from this insight that I was going through Sushant's case history
Yes.
also, and he
Yes.
appeared to be a person who was very much in touch with himself also, intellectually also, and a seeker kind of a person as well.
Yes.
And also he was having most of the desires fulfilled.
Yes.
So looking from the other side of the story, and
Very true.
also you shared that story with us, of Ramanujan, and I watched that movie as well, and
Oh,
and I
yes.
s- and I saw that that incident where it was shown that he tried to commit suicide at one point. He decided, and a person of again such a person who was again in touch with himself to
Yes.
such a great extent. And also I've read so many other such
Mm.
seekers, true seekers, who are realized people, but at some point they wanted to give up their life because of that intensity of their inner fire was so strong, but then they were not able to cross over, or maybe something.
Well, the almost 90% of the question is in the maybe that you have said,
Yeah.
because what we see in these people, taking Sushant or other things, I want to tell a little more about the nature of this outer person and the nature of the inner person. All right. So when we are living in our outer personality, we have no any deep aspiration. We are not doing yogasana, meditation, concentration. Nothing is there. But we have worked a lot. See, Sushant is an actor, so he must have worked a lot on how does one express oneself, because when he cries, he will make a million people cry. That is the control he has over the emotions, and that is what makes anybody into an actor, the tremendous control. Now, if we develop the capacities in our mind or in our emotion, as in this case, an actor having so much control over emotions, because the way he articulates himself with such pleasantness, because when he cries, you also, I'm sure you must feel like crying when he is in a, even in a movie, when he is feeling the loss of his girlfriend, or when he is wanting to express anything, you also have a tendency to want him to have it. Now that is the capacity that we have. If we develop these capacities only in the outer personality, and when we begin to live in that, what we call as the emotion, mother calls it as the vital part of us. When we are there, this vital part has one particular tendency that even when it is well developed without in contact with the inner self, it is susceptible to very grave and deep misgivings. And that is the nature of the outer, because when we live on the emotional part of us, when something nice and favorable happens, we are on cloud nine. But because it is a state of, this is a part which gets excited too easily. But when something which is not okayish happens, it is the same part which can sink so low that it can cause the exact opposite reaction with equal intensity. So, for example, people like, we don't yet know what happened to Sushanta. So let us take an example of one imaginary actor who actually committed suicide because of depression, but he was successful on the outside. When on the outside, every emotion, this person is developed an intensity, but he has not developed a connection with the inner self. So that intensity can be taken over by good things as well as, I mean, positive things as well as negative things. Simply because whatever we develop on the outside can be influenced by other things if we develop only intensity, if we don't develop a wisdom of how to what do we apply this emotion and make the best out of our life, then what happens is with that intensity, something untoward happens. We having a very intense emotion intensely feels the negative things, and very quickly it goes down much faster than you and I, who are normal people. See, we can call ourselves as flatliners. We don't have that capacity of exuberance like a Sushant or like an actor, because their life is a mega life. Just look at the way they throw the parties and the way they express their emotions as if it is 100 times more than your and my happiness. But also because it is an outer intensity, when something negative happens, they can also dip to 100% intensely negative things too. Now, when we look at, when they are on a high, we look at and we say, wow, these people are like, no, such happy, brilliant people. But we don't get to see them when they feel the same intensity, when negative things overpower them, because it is inevitable when we live on the surface. Now this happens for intense person, either on a high they are very intense, and when they are happy, well, they can make everybody feel happy. That is the intensity. But when they are sad, they can get so self-destructive. Whereas you and I probably are flatliners. We don't feel so excited. We don't have that capacity, but we don't have the capacity to sink so low. Our depressions are smaller, but these intense people's depressions are 100 times more, just as their happiness and excitement also can be 100 times more. But if you look at some actors and even some sports person, there you can easily make out the people who have developed this intensity as a result of being in touch with their inner self. And these are the people who will say and who will make use of that particular word, they are in the zone. For example, Usain Bolt, when he goes for that 100-meter dash, which was the world's best run ever, when somebody asked him, muscles are under extreme stretch, extreme pain, because the world's fastest run is being made. Just imagine the condition your body is going to be. Every muscle is put to its maximum. And at that state, if you have to ask somebody, of course, if you ask me, I will say it is an intense torture because everything is stretched to its maximum. He said it was the most blissful experience. He said, I was in the zone. Or when a Sachin Tendulkar executes that chakka marna with that beautiful flow, and then when you ask him, he will say, I am in the zone. When a true actor, when he gives a performance, and then you ask that person that if the person is in touch with his inner self, he will say he is in the zone. Interestingly, I happened to hear one interview of what is that singer, Shreya Ghoshal. So somebody asked her, what is the difference when you sing to a mass, 100,000 people in front, and when you sing inside the studio? And this is what we said. And I have developed my capacity to feel the energy of my audience, and accordingly, I can bring out the energy to make them happy. It's not an uncontrolled one. But when she is in the studio, you know what she said? She said, it is a meditative experience for me. That shows the caliber of the person. Where does that singing capacity come from? Not from mere outside personality, because when she sings, of course, you know how well she sings. And when such a person stands in front of 1,000 and even 1,000,000 people, she will still be able to be intense, but that intensity will not affect her negatively because that is something that comes from outside. So this gives you an idea. If we don't enter into this practice of yoga, you see, whatever you develop is susceptible. You're just developing an intensity of thoughts even. Look at all the corporate people, their capacity to think is so good. And yet, what are they using their thinking power for? I'm not talking about all the corporates, but there are a few who will simply say that all this is focused on how do I make profit, meaning how do I get the money which is there in your pocket and get it for me, and this is it. Their entire mental capacity, if you develop the mental power through the normal conventional training that is there, without being in touch with your inner self, you are going to end up in a state where you have lot of power, but you don't know what to do with. I'm going to give you a third example because I want to drive this home. What happens when we are living on the surface? Let us not be deceived by this. That's why I'm sharing this with you. Have you ever watched this WWF on the TV, where people with beautiful, magnificent physique are bashing each other and blood comes out? They pick up the chair and bang, bang and throw. I have to tell you, I know I've done a little bit of physical education myself. I know the amount of effort and focus it takes to develop a body which is near perfect. Now, to what use am I putting that body to? That entertainment where you bang and bash and you say really vulgar words and you provoke, and then all the drama. One doesn't feel nice when one sees that. Why? This is the result when you develop your body without entering into a discipline of yoga. When your physical development is not yogic in nature, well, you are left to use it the way you want, and the way you want is the ego takes over. So the ego is the boss of our outer personality, and the ego is easily overpowered by anything that comes from outside. But even if we make this much progress, but we remain in touch with our inner self, that is a true, solid, everlasting progress. And nobody in this world can take away that progress from us because it happens on the inside. So one touch, one glimpse, accessing the wisdom, accessing the power, the inner energy. If we do it, then nobody can actually overpower us because they don't have access to this dimension. So in short, as long as we live on the surface, as long as we do not deepen and widen and begin to live inside out, whatever capacity and whatever things you may have, which even the whole world praises, they are always susceptible for this particular thing. I want to emphasize this again and again. Let's not be caught up by the talent shows and these things. The true talent is the talent which comes from there. And the true capacity is the capacity which is developed by remaining in touch with it outwardly. Also, people can develop the capacity, but when they need it most, it is going to fail them, as in the case of the imaginary actor who is world famous, who has everything, and then who committed suicide, and not the real one, because we don't yet know. So I'm taking the imaginary actor.
Sure.
Over to you, Rishi. I'm
So I
glad
think
you asked the
you have
question, Pragya,
already
because it goes right into
correct.
the
Correct.
processes.
I think you have already answered. So this is
Yeah,
a
it's
deeply
getting more and
question
more
to
interesting, but
Vijaji and
we are
Joma.
falling short of time, and already we have taken up. So everybody else, you stay only if you have burning question. A question like Pragya is, I know, I would appreciate to hear this question anytime, anywhere.
Sure. And I think that Pooja and Huma had a similar question that sometimes in depression there is a clash between the inner and outer world.
Ah,
For example, when I'm in inner peace, I feel content, but
yes,
in outer side there is all negativity, and that
yes,
brings anxiety. I think that you already touched upon
yes.
it.
So when we
Yes.
get in touch with the inner, we become,
Hmm.
what they call as non-stick tawa. So the outside negativities do not stick onto us. So, and then we can do our function properly, but we can be in touch with everything, like how in a non-stick tawa. I'm telling this example because I started spending so much time in kitchen nowadays. So it comes naturally to me. So the things of the outside world, the negativities do not stick to you when you
Hmm.
live this inside out. But when you
Hmm.
live on the outside, whatever may be your capacity, whatever may be your talent, you're open towards influence. And every day you'll be on a high and you will be on that sinusoidal wave. That will be the life. But we don't want our life to be on a flat where neither happiness nor sadness, but we are neutral, which means we are just isolating ourselves, which is also not the state, the correct state. So the flat line or going up and down, both are not the ideal states, but living inside out in the most dynamic way is our ideal.
Hmm. Sure. Sure. I think now we can move to the next question by Pranav. And Pranav says that I have a lot of laziness, but I try to fight it. Whenever I try to discipline, study well, eat well, work out, it only lasts for a few weeks or so. Then I lose my motivation for a week or so.
It
And
lasts
this
for a
cycle,
few weeks for him. Hello?
that's amazing. Mine is
That's
just one
good.
day.
There you are. Well,
One-
congratulations. It lasts for weeks.
I think then this question is almost like I'm amazing. So this cycle keeps on reporting. What can I do to be consistent with my
Yeah.
discipline?
So
Yeah.
initially, because we are so outwardly oriented, so many things in the world draw our attention, we may not be able to maintain what I have called the aspiration. We can still do everything with the aspiration that may this be an expression of what is there inside. But at times we forget because we get caught up in the activity. When you're watching a nice movie, of course, you are already identified yourself with the character. When the laughing goes there, you laugh. When the crying goes there, you cry. When so many things are drawn outward, then obviously we will not be able to remain. And therefore, first thing is achieve the victories in a very, very progressive way. Don't think this, oh, Shivakumar has said such a nice thing. There is inside. I have a mind which is greater than my normal mind. I have an emotional part which is an inner emotional part which is unlimited emotion. So tomorrow I'm setting my target that I want to get in touch with this inner. Well, may happen, but may not happen too. But
Mm.
learn to being progressively in this state, which means that inevitably we cannot be in this state initially 24 hours, as simple as that. And that
Mm.
is where choosing external things wisely and as much as we can, because it's not completely in our control, it
Mm.
becomes a terrific help. Organizing, regulating the outer life so that we get maximum time for this inside out life becomes an essential. So we can actually cut down on the number of instances I feel lazy. But I'm sure you can't feel lazy for no 24 hours, because at some point you will feel like getting up and then at least eating. That is an action. That's not laziness anymore. Watching something, stimulating, anything, it's part of your nature. So even laziness is not going to stay for a long time. But do not try to overcome everything in one go, because then you will end up in an unsatisfied state. And as I explained in the beginning, when you encounter an unpleasant, unsatisfactory state, that is the time when the outer personality sinks, it gets vexed, and then it triggers depression or at least dissatisfaction, if not at least sadness. And all these things, once you have it, you begin to sink further and further. When we feel negative emotions, there is only one way we are going to go, which is we are going to sink down. And therefore, we will have to learn first to stop identifying with them. When, for example, anger comes, you have to tell ourselves that anger is not part of my inner nature. It's coming from outside. That itself will give you a strength, because this is an enemy and this is an unwanted enemy. And this is an enemy with, if I focus my everything on it, I will not feel anything else. So I learn to ignore. So in such a things, when you are laziness, try this. Can you ignore laziness? It's an interesting and tricky question. You just, when laziness is there, just don't pay attention to it. Get up and go for a run. And don't worry about anything else. And once you start running, then you will be looking around, where is that laziness? What happened to it? That's it. And it's interesting. The people who are runners, Palak is a marathon runner, you'll understand. Just have to get into it. But if you start spending time with your enemy, oh, I have laziness, oh, I don't have energy, and then you center your thoughts and emotions around it, nothing else will be visible. Just to say, laziness, sorry, I'm going to shut my eyes towards you. I'm just going to get up and run. Can you do it? Of course. But don't worry, will I be able to do it? Will my guest laziness will feel bad? And then I will feel sad that he is bad and I will have to give him company. All the things will start coming. Ignorance is one of the best tools to defeat the enemy. If you are with siblings, you know the power of ignorance. When your sibling wants to irritate you, if you just ignore, it hits back at him, and very soon he will give up and he will retreat. As simple as that. So this is the thing. The negative things that happen to us, we cannot have positive things immediately. Ignore by turning your attention to 100 other things which are interesting, and then you will see where is laziness, where is other thing. But keep some habits like this.
Yes.
Like running or enjoyable things. When you are in laziness, take up something interesting and then do it, and then that's it.
Sure, sure. I think next is by
All
fear.
right, it is 9:38. Well,
Should we just ask?
two more
Okay,
questions. Okay,
two more questions. Fine, fine.
this is also a victory sign. Anyway, after 2 questions, we will victoriously end the session. Fine.
Sure. So I think this question is by Harshvardhan and Bannadi. These are linked. So the question is how to fight with the emotion that is going on inside us, and how. And the second question, a similar one, is how do we overcome the fear of being sick by seeing sick around us? So these are related to fear and then fighting.
First question: how do we fight emotion? Emotions are like Vali. I hope you know the character in Ramayana. Anybody knows what is the specialty of Vali?
No.
We belong to modern generation. We don't know really about.
Yes,
Well,
yes, I know.
Yes, Pragya, please share.
So, yeah, he had this power that with whoever he will fight, he will absorb his talents or capacities and energy.
So whoever confronts him directly, he will immediately get half the energy. Emotions or any negative state for that matter are like Vali. The moment you or we who are not in touch or armed with the inner arsenal, the moment we confront, it means two things. One, we are going to be spending too much time with our enemy. Second, the moment we confront, half of our energy is already taken away. And therefore, I would not recommend fighting your emotions. And it's beautiful. Once one sadhak went to the mother in Sri Aurobindo Ashram here in Pondicherry, and it's a beautiful aspiring sadhak. So she wanted to be the best she can be. So she said, I'm going to work on all my shortcomings and negativities because I have anger and irritation and this. And she made a big list and she took it to the mother and said, Mother, I want to be the best I can be. And I want to work on all these negativities. There are so many things. I want you to help me, please. And do you know what mother has said? Well, my child, I will not I want you to focus on the good, positive things in you. And as you focus on them and develop, automatically the negative things will come down. And that is a beautiful example. Our focus should be on aspiring towards things that are beautiful, things that are, Mother has said somewhere that I always look upwards. Why? Because that is where the beauty and the wisdom and the power, the strength, the harmony, all the things which are good and worth having, they're waiting to come into me, from within me, from above me. And therefore, I always look upward. The more I focus on negative things, then more I lose. This doesn't mean that to pretend as if the problem is there, but a positive ignoring so that the enemy runs away. Then only we can say that we are free of the enemy, by ignoring the negative emotion and focusing on the positive emotions is the way of doing it. And what was the
Sure.
second question?
1 second. Sorry. How to overcome the fear of being falling sick? The fear of being falling sick by seeing the
I have
fear
already
around us.
answered, because if you want to actually look at the fear of everything, like when you step outside, already you are in. What if a corona case is there right now? Because I still remember, even in Pondicherry, somewhere in the peripheral cases were happening. It all seemed unreal when I stepped out, because when I step outside, Pondicherry was the safe place, the main town. But well, yesterday we have, I think it has crossed 200, and I got the news that it is there in the next street. Now, when I step out, if I step out with the fear that has come so close to me, and it is almost like inviting the fear. Remember, fear is an enemy, and then dwell on it and forgetting that, well, samadhi is also there. Why don't I think of the samadhi and the terrific power and vibrations that it has, and I'm so close to it, or the inner power which I have, where I dwell more on it, and if I have to step out, I dwell more on the inner strength and inner power, and I don't entertain the fear of falling ill. And fear is one of the worst enemies that we have. And in fact, one of the major cause, according to me, for so many people getting corona, is one of the major causes is the fear. Why? Because the fear creates a hole. It opens more doors in my house, which is in a marketplace. And with all the enemies, well, corona also could be one of the enemies that enter. Very nice,
Sure.
a funny
So,
story comes to my mind, but we don't have time to narrate that fun story.
sure, we can maybe post it later. I think one more thing. Ravi had a follow-up question. So I've asked question of Ravi earlier. I think you yourself, Ravi, can unmute and then ask the question. It is a pretty long question, hence I think it's
Yes.
best if we can answer.
Yep. Yeah. Thanks, Rishi. Thanks, Shivda, for picking up the question and answering it. So I get it that it's so ignorance is kind of a superpower that we humans have, and we can use it to divert our attention, let's say, from depression to other important things in our life, and it's a very important step towards recovering and getting out of it.
And remember, it's a two-step, not just ignoring, but also turning and picking up something which is positive in its nature. That's what combines.
Right. Yep. Absolutely. So, what my question is coming in is from a different school of thought, which basically a lot of different other uh, psychologists are saying that people, depression is something. It's kind of a wound in your inner being, and people who are not able to openly talk about it and not able to share their emotions, whatever they are feeling or the reasons, is kind of the main reason why they are facing these extreme why they are taking these extreme actions like suicide or busting out in public or something like that. It's kind of a pressure building up in a pressure cooker, unfunctioning pressure cooker, which ultimately breaks up.
Yes.
So that's where my question comes in. Like, I understand the part of ignoring it, but that constant pain that you are feeling, how you should deal with that.
All right. So the first statement that you said is that it is depression is something that is happening on the inner being is not true, because what we say inner being, our true personality on the other side, it's a 24 karat gold. and that is our core. There is nothing negative in it. What we have, depression, can happen only in the outer personality, our normal mind, normal emotions, and in our body through fatigue. So if we have to understand this in order to figure out how it happens. So once we see that the depression is something that can affect only the outer personality and not the inner personality, then the things become very, very easy to deal with it. So I want you to ask your question from this point of view and then see whether you still have that question. Now rephrase it and then tell me. So it is, depression can never be part of the inner being. It can only be part of our surface, but only when we live on the surface are we likely to catch depression. Now reframe your question and then ask.
Okay. Uh, so basically, if depression is not something a wound on the inner being,
Hmm.
it's kind of a wound on
Outer being.
outer being. And
So our
yeah,
pressure cooker is our outer personality,
yep,
and the fuse blows quite frequently there on the outer personality.
yep, absolutely. So I have this question coming in because I have a friend who is, I know, is feeling depression, but she's not able to openly come out and talk about it.
Ha ha.
And
Now,
that's where the worry comes in, that
now this is something which is painful when we can feel that depression and we are not able to, because it's not easy to help another person to come out of depression. That can never happen unless and until we ourselves have conquered the possibility of depression within us. If so, that victory gives us a certain vibratory power, because of which whatever we do will act as an influence on the other person. So I'm talking about very technical and yogic way of looking at things. Now, first thing, we should develop a capacity to look into the mind and emotions of the other person before we can figure out the damage the depression has done or the importance the depression is having in the external personality. Without which, only by looking at the outside behavior, we will not be able to provide true solutions. So, how do we develop the capacity to look into and exactly perceive the mental status and the emotional status of the other person? It cannot be done through physical eyes. With physical eyes, we can only give the result, because people can very nicely hide the real depression that is happening, as probably if the recent suicide which has happened is because of depression, I don't think anybody has a clue about it, and that is something that happens. So first thing, if you really want to help the other person, you should develop the capacity of becoming aware first of what happens within you. Without that, you will never get a power to intuit what happens in the other person. Now, if you are using the tool of awareness, if you are so thoroughly aware of what happens within you and then get into that inner self, through that power, this inner self has a power of directly entering into and identifying with the other person in order to figure out what happens in them. This is called identification, or in other words, intuition. The intuition is a natural capacity of the inside person, so much so that when you use that power of intuition, you get identified with the other person so much so that you begin to know him better than he knows himself. Because sometimes he may not even be ready to acknowledge and recognize that depression is driving him, but through the process of intuition and the process of knowledge by identification, when you do that, you get to know what exactly is happening. And not only that, you are able to see that behind it, in his true personality, what are the things that could be helpful and ready to come out. And if you do that, you just have to suggest to him something which will enable this to happen. A few words, the right words told to that person, it is going to come out from within you, will be the exact words he needed to hear, and suddenly inside him a door opens and he comes out of it. Has it not occurred to happen to you that in your life, perhaps in some special moments, you said exactly the words which somebody else needed to hear, or you did that one thing which made a tremendous difference to the other person. And if it has happened to you, know that it is coming from inside. So the only way you can truly help the other person is yourself centered in your inner core. And from there, having the capacity to intuit what has happened to the other person. And then you know what words to say and what activities to suggest, which will suddenly open his inner doors. And once this happens, well, he has all the help that he needs, which is going to come from within. A third one, which is a high level, which we can only hope and dream, is what happens with the spiritual masters. They have such a capacity of reaching out inside you that if a depression is like a leech holding on to your emotional person, they can reach out and pick out the leech and then put it outside of you. Only thing, you shouldn't feel that, oh, my leech is going, and then if you go and grab it once again, the depression will come back to you. But if you truly have that capacity, like some great spiritual masters or some places which is filled with spiritual vibration, if we take that person, what happens is all the leeches which are sticking onto negative things are actually put outside. Only thing, we feel so much the loss of, without depression, I'm not feeling any intensity because life is very bland. I need something to feel, even if it is depression is okay. If you feel that, then the leech comes back and then gets stuck onto you. Hope that answers you, Ravi.
Yep,
But if
absolutely.
nothing works, I mean, understanding where we are, we may not have those powers completely developed. One thing which is works is to formulate an intense prayer and then send it up to whatever power is there, that may my friend come out of the depression. I don't know how to help him to come out of it. That true prayer, an intense one, which comes from the depth of your personality, that has a tremendous power. The other person need not even know about it. But this is the power of the prayer, not in the conventional way. um, God, if my friend becomes happy, I will come and give you through 3 coconuts, and that is like trying to bribe. But true intense aspiration for the wellness, goodness of your friend, it's a terrific power. We underestimate the power of prayer.
Yep.
Is
Sure.
this over, Palak?
I think there is one more thing.
Okay, the last question, because
Last
after
question.
that,
Yes. Yes.
I'm
Yes. So I think Harsh had a question. Maybe Harsh, just you can quickly ask a
Yeah.
question.
Thank you, sir, for giving anything with
Harsh.
any person. Hello.
we
Yeah.
lost you momentarily. Now you are audible. Go ahead, Harsh.
Okay. So I have a question that if we share with someone, so something comes in mind. Do we are sharing for sympathy or empathy? So in that situation, what we have to do? And there is one more question, like if somebody asks you what's your problem, so their situation comes, okay, I have to identify my question, what problems is going in inside me or something like that. So I have been this situation when somebody asks me what's the problem, so I'm not able to get it, like what it is or how it is. And another one is that sympathy, should I share just because for sympathy or not?
Okay, your second question, it will go into a little bit, but we will take up the question of sympathy and empathy. What is the true way of feeling it? Well, this is one thing. When we are living on the surface, the moment we try to sympathize or empathize with somebody, we can never ever do it without taking some of that person's negative vibration.
Hmm.
Otherwise, you see, sympathy and empathizing doesn't mean just saying some words and then making a show of anything. I'm talking about true sympathy and empathy is when you are able to share in the sadness of your friend, just as you will share in his happiness, which means that you, unless and until you take part of the negative emotion which the person is feeling, it is not a true empathizing. It will happen because of contagion, because of your affinity, because of your openness towards your friend. If you are with a friend, whatever he goes through, if you are open to him, it's going to flow into you nicely. So you have to be very careful that when you're already living in the surface, and if you want to sympathize with the person who is under depression, what it means is you are allowing the vibrations of depressions to enter into you. And that is going to be really something you have to be careful if you are living on the surface. And you should have the capacity to feel these things. What flows when you are with a friend? What happens when you are with a friend is a constant interaction of energies. And that is why when your friend is in a happy mood and you be with him for 2 minutes, you also feel happy. But opposite is also true. When you are with a friend who is depressed, in 2 minutes, you are going to feel that depression. And therefore, you have to approach before empathizing or sympathizing. You will have to do it with a certain armor which is there. And that is going to happen only when you are rooted in yourself and when you are aware of the energy exchange that is happening. And when you are able to sense that energy happening, you put yourself and you fill yourself with so much positivity so that you can influence and give a little bit of positiveness by being happy, by having goodwill for that person. It flows into, and what you do as an expression of your happiness or a goodwill will gradually help the other person to come out. But you have to be conscious that it doesn't happen the other way, that you went to cheer a depressed person, and then when you return at home, mother asks you, you're all completely depressed. That shouldn't happen. So act by understanding your limitation.
Sure.
All right. I think it's time to close because we are completing 2 hours for what was intended to be 1 hour. But I'm happy that at least 10, 15 people are still seeking. I'm still seeing Aishwarya. So good to see you, Aishwarya. And I don't even get to see if everybody, if you can switch on your camera, then we can have a conclusion. And I would really like to see Vijay and Shivam. Of course, I know you. Akriti, I don't know whether it is an Akriti I know or it is a... Oh, Saurav. Saurav, what's happening to your dinner? Getting cold Sunday dinner and... But one thing that you have not switched on your camera, so I'm assuming your dinner also has happened simultaneously. Only I am the one who is talking, so my dinner is still waiting. So Pooja...
No, not absolutely, not at all. It gets quite late for having dinner.
Well, there you are. And Pooja ji has G as part of her name, so I can address her only with respect. Pooja ji, if you could switch on your... And I'm glad that we have. And probably we will look at this question from a couple of more other point of view also in the coming Sundays. We have somebody who is also a practitioner of yoga and simultaneously a psychologist. So from the psychology point of view, and we might have somebody else also coming to address, especially the teenagers catching this depression. Well, Akriti, well, I'm glad to see you. This is something that all
Hello,
our
sir.
teenagers know. And thank you, Poojaji, also. One final takeaway is there is something which have to know, which is not taught to us in our school, nor were we told during our training programs in our corporate, nor did our parents told us, is what is within us and what we carry within us. And that what we carry within us is so beautifully taken up and explained in a most scientific way is in the yoga approach of India. And it is time that we recovered this approach and started living inside out. We don't yet know what is inside of us. We are having a diamond which is right there in the depth of our heart. And if we can bring it out, then we can shine forth in this life. With that beautiful thought, I hand it over to Rishi, who will conclude.
Yes. And I hand it over to Rahul, who will conclude.
And Rahul is going to hand it over to Palak. Well, may the diamond inside you speak and shine. Who is going to conclude?
Palak should conclude.
Over to you, Palak.
Thank you so much, Shivda, for throwing such pertinent insights on a topic that is really, really burning and really alive within a lot of us. And thank you all of us for and everybody who has stayed back till now, like really really appreciate. And like let us continue pondering, let us continue practicing what we've taken back from this session. We will have these sessions every week moving forward. We would love to hear any suggestions or any more burning questions that you might have, or any other suggestions for topic that we might take up in the coming sessions. um, with that, let us take a moment of silence and then we can conclude.
So in that
Just
moment
wanted
of
to add one
silence,
point.
I will tell
Any
then what we are supposed to
suggestions?
do in that silence. Yes, Rahul.
Yes. Any suggestions that you want to send in the poster? There's Rishi's and my contact number, so you can send it to us there. Shubhaya.
They will float
Our
a link forward.
all these people are available famous over Facebook too, so you can come. So let us conclude with a minute of silence where we express our gratitude to for having such a wonderful session where a lot of things got cleared. So we remain quiet, expressing our gratitude.